Daniel stepped onto the plane with his daughter Lily's small hand gripped tightly in his. The little girl was barely 6 years old, clutching that old stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was a baby. Its ears were worn thin from years of being dragged everywhere, but she wouldn't go anywhere without it. Daniel could feel the exhaustion in his bones. The custody hearing had drained every ounce of energy he had left, but at least it was over. At least Lily was coming home with him for good this time. The midnight flight from Seattle to New York was mostly empty. Red-eye flights usually were. Just tired business travelers trying to save a day of work, and people like him who couldn't afford the daytime ticket prices. Daniel guided Lily down the narrow aisle to their seats in economy. Row 23, right by the wing. He lifted her into the window seat so she could look out at the lights of the city below once they took off. "Daddy, I'm sleepy," Lily whispered, rubbing her eyes with tiny fists. "I know, sweetheart. You can sleep on the plane. We'll be home before you know it." As Daniel settled into his seat and helped Lily buckle her seatbelt, he noticed the woman across the aisle. She was impossible not to notice, really. Everything about her screamed money and power. The tailored charcoal suit probably cost more than his rent. Her watch caught the overhead light, and Daniel recognized it as one of those fancy Swiss brands he'd only seen in magazine ads. Her laptop was open on the tray table even though they hadn't taken off yet, and her fingers moved across the keyboard like she was composing a symphony. But it was her face that caught Daniel's attention. Despite the expensive clothes and the confident way she carried herself, she looked tired. Not the regular kind of tired you get from a long day. This was deeper, the kind of exhaustion that settles into your soul when you've been running too hard for too long. Daniel recognized it because he'd seen that same look in his own mirror plenty of times over the past 2 years since his wife passed away. The woman didn't look up as more passengers filed past. She was completely absorbed in whatever she was working on. Her phone kept buzzing on the armrest, but she ignored it. 3 calls in the span of 5 minutes, and she didn't even glance at the screen. Daniel turned his attention back to Lily. The little girl had already pressed her nose against the window, watching the ground crew load luggage into the belly of the plane. "Look, Daddy! That truck is so tiny from up here. We haven't taken off yet, baby. We're still on the ground." "Oh." She giggled, that sweet sound that could still make Daniel smile even on his worst days. The flight attendants went through their safety demonstration. Daniel had heard it 100 times, but he paid attention anyway. Old habits from his military days. Always know your exits. Always have a plan. His eyes traced the emergency routes automatically, counting rows to the nearest exit. 14 rows back, 2 forward. 20 minutes later, they were airborne. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, smooth and practiced. "We've reached our cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. Weather looks good all the way to New York. We should have you on the ground right on schedule. Flight attendants, you're free to move about the cabin." The lights dimmed. Most passengers pulled down their window shades and settled in for the long flight. Lily had already fallen asleep, her head resting against the window, the stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. Daniel allowed himself to relax just a little. Maybe he could get some sleep too. God knew he needed it. He was just starting to doze off when something made him open his eyes. Call it instinct. Call it his old training. Call it whatever you want. But something felt wrong. 2 men had stood up near the front of the cabin. There was nothing obviously suspicious about it. People get up on flights all the time. Need to stretch their legs. Use the bathroom. But something about the way they moved set off alarm bells in Daniel's head. Too purposeful. Too coordinated. Daniel sat up straighter, his exhaustion forgotten. His eyes tracked the 2 men as they moved. One was heading toward the business class section. The other was reaching into his jacket for something. The woman across the aisle was still working on her laptop, completely oblivious. Her phone buzzed again, and this time Daniel saw the name on the screen before it went dark. The caller ID just said security team. That's when everything clicked into place. The expensive suit, the constant work, the ignored security calls, the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who'd been receiving threats. This woman wasn't just some random business traveler. She was someone important. Someone who might have people wanting to hurt her, and these 2 men weren't just getting up to stretch their legs. Daniel's heart started pounding. He glanced at Lily, still sleeping peacefully against the window. Then back at the 2 men. One of them was almost at the woman's row now. His hand was inside his jacket. Time seemed to slow down the way it always did in dangerous situations. Daniel had experienced it before years ago during his deployment. The world gets crystal clear. Every detail sharp. Your body moves before your mind fully processes what's happening. The man's hand came out of his jacket. Daniel saw the glint of something metallic. Not a gun, he didn't think. Maybe a knife, maybe a syringe. Whatever it wasn't good. The second man had positioned himself to block the aisle, preventing anyone from coming forward from the back of the plane. They'd planned this. This was coordinated, professional. The woman finally looked up from her laptop, and Daniel saw the exact moment she recognized the man standing over her. Her face went completely white. Her mouth opened like she wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The first attacker lunged forward. His hand shot out toward the woman's neck. Daniel didn't think. Didn't plan. Didn't calculate the risks. He just moved. He unbuckled his seatbelt and launched himself across the narrow aisle. His body crashed into the attacker just as the man's hand was inches from the woman's throat. They both stumbled backward, slamming into the seats behind them. "Stay down," Daniel shouted at the woman, putting himself between her and the attacker. The cabin erupted in chaos. Someone screamed. Multiple people screamed. The second attacker was rushing toward them now, shoving past passengers who scrambled to get out of the way. Daniel barely had time to brace himself before the first attacker recovered and swung at him. The punch caught him square in the jaw, and Daniel tasted blood. But he'd taken worse hits before. Much worse. He kept his footing, kept his body positioned as a shield between the attackers and the woman behind him. "Who is she?" the attacker hissed, trying to get past Daniel. "Move!" "Not happening," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. Behind him, he heard the woman's sharp intake of breath. Heard her whisper something that sounded like a name, though he couldn't make it out over the screaming passengers. The second attacker had reached them now. Daniel was outnumbered, exhausted from days of stress and no sleep, and he had a 6-year-old daughter watching from just a few feet away. But none of that mattered. Some things you do because they're right, because if you don't, you can't live with yourself afterward. Daniel set his feet and prepared for the fight of his life. The second attacker came at Daniel like a freight train. The narrow airplane aisle worked in Daniel's favor, though. Only one of them could really engage him at a time, and he used that to his advantage. The first punch came fast, but Daniel saw it coming and deflected it with his forearm. The impact sent a jolt of pain up to his shoulder, but he'd felt worse. What he wasn't prepared for was the elbow that followed. It caught him in the ribs, and Daniel heard something crack. The breath left his lungs in a painful wheeze, but he couldn't back up. Behind him was the woman pressed against the window seat, her laptop forgotten on the floor. If he moved, they'd get to her. "Daddy." Lily's terrified voice cut through the chaos. Daniel risked a quick glance. His daughter was standing on her seat, tears streaming down her face, still clutching that stuffed rabbit. Her eyes were wide with fear. "Lily, baby, sit down and stay there," Daniel commanded, trying to keep his voice calm even as the first attacker grabbed his shirt. "Don't move, sweetheart. Stay right where you are." To her credit, Lily did exactly what he said. She sat down hard, pulling the rabbit close to her chest, but she didn't take her eyes off her father. Daniel could see she was shaking, and it broke his heart. She'd already lost her mother. She couldn't lose him too. The first attacker yanked Daniel sideways, trying to throw him off balance. Daniel went with the momentum, using it to drive his shoulder into the man's chest. They crashed into the seats on the opposite side of the aisle. Somewhere behind them, a passenger was crying. Someone else was shouting into their phone. "Where are the air marshals?" a man's voice yelled. "Someone do something!" Daniel didn't have time to wonder where the marshals were. He was too busy trying to keep two trained attackers away from their target. And they were trained. He could tell from the way they moved, the way they worked together. These weren't random thugs. Someone had hired professionals. The woman spoke from behind him, her voice surprisingly steady despite the fear Daniel could hear underneath. "You need to move. They want me, not you. Let them take me and they'll leave everyone else alone." "Not a chance," Daniel grunted, blocking another punch. His jaw was already swelling from the first hit, and he could feel blood drip. Ping from his split lip. "You don't understand," the woman continued, and now Daniel could hear the desperation creeping into her voice. "I'm Victoria Chen, CEO of Chen Technologies. This is about a business deal. About money. You're going to die for a corporate dispute. So that was her name. Victoria Chen. Daniel had heard it before, seen her face on the news a few times. Something about medical technology. Didn't matter. None of that mattered right now. I've got a 6-year-old daughter sitting 10 feet away, Daniel said, dodging a grab from the second attacker. She's already seen too much violence in her short life. I'm not going to teach her that we stand by and watch when people need help. Not for all the corporate deals in the world. The first attacker finally landed a solid hit. His fist connected with Daniel's eye and the world exploded in stars. Daniel stumbled back, his shoulder hitting Victoria's seat. He could taste more blood now, and his vision in his left eye was already starting to blur from the swelling. But he didn't go down. Years of military training, years of getting back up after life knocked him down, all of it came flooding back. He straightened up, putting his body squarely between Victoria and her attackers once again. Last chance, the first attacker said, breathing hard. His knuckles were bleeding too. Walk away. This doesn't concern you. Everything that happens on this plane concerns every single person on it, Daniel replied. That's how society works. You want her, you go through me. The second attacker pulled something from his pocket. Daniel's heart sank when he saw the glint of metal. A knife. Short blade, maybe 4 inches, but more than enough to do serious damage in close quarters like this. Several passengers screamed when they saw the weapon. The crying got louder. Someone was praying in Spanish. The chaos in the cabin was reaching a breaking point. Daddy, Lily's voice again, small and terrified. Eyes closed, baby, Daniel shouted. Close your eyes tight and think about your rabbit. Think about the story we read last night, remember? The one about the rabbit who was brave? He heard her whisper, the brave rabbit who saved his friends. That's right, sweetheart. Just like that rabbit. Now close your eyes. Daniel didn't take his eyes off the knife. His military training ran through his head. Knife fights are messy. Even if you win, you're probably getting cut. The key is to control the weapon hand. Don't let them make slashing motions. Get in close where they can't build momentum. The attacker with the knife moved forward cautiously. He was smart. Didn't rush in. These guys were good at what they did, which made Daniel's job a lot harder. Behind him, Victoria was on her phone now. Daniel could hear her speaking quickly, urgently. I don't care where they are. Tell them we have a situation on Flight 2847. 2 attackers armed. They've gotten past... Her voice cut off as someone apparently interrupted her. The knife came at Daniel in a quick thrust. He moved on instinct, grabbing the attacker's wrist with both hands. The momentum carried both of them into the seats. Daniel twisted hard, trying to force the man to drop the weapon. The attacker grunted in pain but held on. They struggled for control of the knife. Daniel could feel his grip slipping. His hands were slick with blood, though he wasn't sure if it was his or the attacker's. His ribs screamed in protest with every movement. That crack he'd heard earlier definitely meant something was broken. The first attacker tried to get around them to reach Victoria, but the aisle was too narrow with Daniel and his partner grappling for the knife. He grabbed at Daniel's shoulder, trying to pull him off his partner. That's when 3 things happened almost simultaneously. First, Lily started singing. It was the song from her favorite movie, the one about the brave rabbit. Her voice was shaky and thin, but she was singing, trying to be brave like her daddy had told her to be. The sound of his daughter's voice gave Daniel a surge of strength he didn't know he had left. Second, Victoria Chen did something Daniel never expected. Instead of staying pressed against the window, she reached out and grabbed the first attacker's ankle. Hard. The man stumbled, his balance thrown off. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Third, and most importantly, 2 men came charging up the aisle from the back of the plane. They were moving fast. Showing identification Daniel couldn't quite see but recognized the type. Federal agents. Air marshals, finally, federal agents! Everyone stay in your seats. The attackers saw them coming. The one with the knife made a desperate decision. Instead of trying to get to Victoria, he turned the blade toward Daniel. It was a pure attack now, no longer trying to get past him. If they couldn't complete their mission, they were at least going to take down the man who'd stopped them. Daniel saw the knife coming toward his chest. Time did that slow motion thing again. He thought about Lily, about how he'd promised his wife before she died that he'd always be there for their daughter, about how Lily had already lost one parent and couldn't lose another. He twisted hard, harder than he thought his injured ribs would allow. The knife missed his chest but caught his shoulder, slicing through his shirt and into the muscle beneath. The pain was immediate and intense, but Daniel used the momentum to finally wrench the knife free from the attacker's grip. The weapon clattered to the floor just as the air marshals reached them. In seconds, both attackers were face down in the aisle, hands being zip-tied behind their backs. It was over. Daniel collapsed against the seats, his shoulder bleeding, his ribs on fire, his face swelling up like a balloon. But alive, still breathing, still able to hear Lily's voice calling for him. "Daddy, Daddy, are you okay?" "I'm okay, baby," Daniel managed to say, though his voice sounded rough even to his own ears. "Daddy's okay." Victoria Chen was staring at him with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. Shock, definitely. Gratitude, but also something else. Something that looked almost like recognition, though they'd never met before that night. "You're insane," she said softly. "You could have been killed." Daniel tried to smile, though it hurt his split lip. "Yeah, well, single parent. We're all a little crazy. Comes with the territory." One of the air marshals was kneeling beside him now, examining his wounds. "We need medical attention here. Is there a doctor on board?" A woman 2 rows back raised her hand. "I'm a nurse." "Let me see." As the nurse began checking Daniel's injuries, he looked past her to where Lily was trying to climb over passengers to get to him. "Let her through," he said, "please. She needs to see I'm okay." When Lily finally reached him, she threw her arms around his neck, careful to avoid his injured shoulder. She was crying hard now, all the fear she'd been holding in coming out in sobs. Daniel held her with his good arm, ignoring the pain in his ribs. "You were so brave, sweetheart," he whispered into her hair, just like the rabbit in the story. "You were braver," Lily hiccuped. "You saved that lady." Daniel looked up to find Victoria watching them, tears streaming down her face. She'd removed her suit jacket and was holding it bunched in her hands like she didn't know what to do with it. All that polish and power from earlier was gone. She just looked human now, vulnerable and very, very grateful to be alive. The plane was already descending. The captain's voice came over the intercom, apologizing for the emergency landing in Chicago. Police and FBI would be meeting them on the ground. Passengers were asked to remain calm and in their seats, but Daniel barely heard any of it. He just held his daughter close and tried to catch his breath, wondering how a simple flight home had turned into the craziest night of his life. The emergency landing in Chicago was rough. Daniel felt every bump and jolt in his broken ribs. The nurse who'd been helping him had done what she could with the first aid kit, but his shoulder really needed stitches, and his ribs probably needed x-rays. Still, he'd refused to let anyone take Lily away from him, even for a minute. She sat on his lap during the landing, both of them holding on tight to each other. When the plane finally stopped at the gate, it was surrounded by emergency vehicles. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. FBI agents boarded first, securing the 2 attackers and escorting them off in handcuffs. Then paramedics came on board, heading straight for Daniel's row. "Sir, we need to get you to the hospital," a young paramedic said, already pulling out equipment to check his vitals. "Not without my daughter," Daniel said firmly, wincing as even talking hurt his ribs. "Of course not. She'll come with us in the ambulance." Victoria Chen appeared at Daniel's side. Her expensive suit was wrinkled now, and her perfectly styled hair had come loose from whatever she'd had it pinned up with. She looked down at Lily, who was still pressed against Daniel's chest, her face streaked with tears. "May I?" Victoria asked gently, holding out her hand to Lily. "I thought you might want to bring this." She was holding the stuffed rabbit that had fallen on the floor during the fight. Lily reached out and took it, hugging it close. "Thank you," she whispered. "No," Victoria said, her voice cracking slightly. "Thank you. Thank your father. He saved my life tonight and I don't even know his name." "Daniel," he said. "Daniel Torres. And this is Lily." "Hello, Lily," Victoria said, managing a small smile. "That's a very brave rabbit you have there." At the hospital, everything became a blur. Doctors examined Daniel's injuries while Lily sat in a chair next to the bed, refusing to let go of his hand. His shoulder needed 17 stitches. 2 of his ribs were cracked. His left eye was swollen shut and his lip needed 3 more stitches. The doctor gave him pain medication and told him he was lucky it wasn't worse. Lucky. Daniel almost laughed at that, but it would have hurt too much. FBI agents came in next. They needed statements, needed to understand exactly what had happened. Daniel told them everything he could remember while Lily dozed in the chair beside him. finally exhausted enough to sleep. The lead agent, a woman named Rodriguez, shook her head as she closed her notebook. "You're either the bravest person I've met or the craziest. Probably both." "Just a dad trying to do the right thing," Daniel said. "Well, your timing was incredible. Another 30 seconds and those attackers would have completed their mission. We've been tracking this plot for 3 weeks. We knew there would be an attempt, but we didn't know when or where. The air marshals on the flight were there specifically because of the threat level. They were just positioned toward the back of the plane. Who were those guys? Why did they want to hurt Mrs. Chen?" Agent Rodriguez glanced at the door, then back at Daniel. "She hasn't told you?" "We didn't exactly have time for introductions while I was getting punched in the face." The agent almost smiled at that. "Victoria Chen isn't just any CEO. Her company is about to announce a breakthrough in medical AI technology, something that could revolutionize how we detect and treat cancer. We're talking about technology that could save millions of lives and eliminate the need for several expensive treatments currently on the market." Daniel started to understand. So companies that make those expensive treatments wanted her stopped. One company in particular, Stellar Biomed. They stand to lose billions if Chen Technologies' announcement goes forward tomorrow morning. They hired those 2 men to ensure that announcement never happened, and they weren't planning to just scare her. This was an assassination attempt. The words hung in the air. Daniel looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully now, her small hand still holding his. He'd literally put his body between his daughter and killers. The reality of how close they'd both come to dying hit him all at once. "The good news," Agent Rodriguez continued, "is that we have both attackers in custody, and they're already talking. By the end of the week, we'll have everyone involved in this plot behind bars. Stellar Biomed's executive team is going to face some very serious charges." After the agent left, Daniel tried to rest, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that knife coming toward him, felt the impact of fists against his face, heard Lily crying. He'd been in combat before, years ago, but somehow this felt different, more personal, more terrifying. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Victoria Chen stepped into the room, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a bag from the hospital cafeteria. She looked different without all the business armor, more real somehow. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," she said quietly. "I brought coffee and some terrible hospital sandwiches, but it's all they had at this hour." "You didn't have to do that." "Actually, I did." Victoria set the coffee down and pulled up a chair on the opposite side of Daniel's bed from where Lily slept. "I owe you everything. You literally took a knife for me. For a complete stranger. I've been trying to understand why someone would do that." Daniel shrugged with his good shoulder, then winced. Lily was watching. What kind of father would I be if I taught her that we only help people when it's convenient, when it's safe? The world doesn't need more people looking out for themselves. It needs more people willing to stand up when it matters. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, just looking at him. Then at Lily. "How old is she?" 6, just turned 6 last month. "She's beautiful. She looks like you." "She looks like her mom, actually. My wife passed away 2 years ago. Cancer." Daniel took a sip of the coffee, grateful for the warmth. "Lymphoma. By the time they caught it, it was too late. She was gone within 6 months. I'm so sorry. That's why I couldn't just stand by tonight. This technology you're working on, this medical AI that can detect cancer earlier. If that had existed 3 years ago, maybe my wife would still be alive. Maybe Lily would still have her mom. So when those guys came at you, I wasn't just protecting a person. I was protecting a chance for other kids to not lose their parents the way Lily lost hers." Victoria's composure finally broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks and she didn't even try to wipe them away. "I've spent the last 20 years building my company, working 80-hour weeks, missing birthdays and holidays, missing my own father's funeral because I had a board meeting I convinced myself I couldn't reschedule. I told myself it was all for the greater good, that the work mattered more than anything else." She looked at Lily again. "But you know what? In all those years and all that time I spent working, I never once thought about the real people my technology would help. They were just statistics, numbers in a presentation. Lives saved became quarterly projections and stock prices. I lost sight of what any of it actually meant." "It's easy to forget," Daniel said. "Life gets complicated. We all lose our way sometimes. I was on that plane tonight running away from death threats instead of toward the people I care about. I don't even know who those people are anymore. I can't remember the last time I had a real conversation with someone that wasn't about business. I have an assistant who buys birthday gifts for my own nieces and nephews because I'm too busy to remember their ages. What kind of person does that? Daniel didn't have an answer for that. He just listened. And then you, Victoria continued. A complete stranger with every reason to protect your daughter and stay out of it. You just threw yourself in front of me without a second thought. You didn't ask who I was. Didn't ask what it was worth to me. Didn't calculate the risk versus reward. You just acted because it was right. Because someone needed help. That's what people are supposed to do, Daniel said simply, but they don't. Not usually. Not in my world. Victoria wiped her eyes, smudging what was left of her makeup. I've spent 20 years in boardrooms with people who would sell their own mothers for a percentage point increase in market share. I've negotiated with people who measure human lives in terms of liability costs. Tonight I met someone who still believes in doing the right thing just because it's right. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Maybe it shouldn't be rare. Maybe if more people just tried to be decent, the world would be a better place. Victoria laughed, but it was a sad sound. You sound like my father. He was a high school teacher, taught history. He used to tell me that society is just people agreeing to look out for each other, that money and power don't mean anything if we forget our humanity. I thought he was naive, too idealistic. I was wrong, and now he's gone, and I can't tell him that. Lily stirred in her sleep, making a small sound. Both adults looked at her. In the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room, she looked even smaller and more vulnerable. Daniel reached over and adjusted the blanket someone had draped over her. What happens now? Daniel asked. With your company? With the announcement tomorrow? The announcement will happen, Victoria said firmly. I've already called my team. They're preparing. The FBI says it's safe now that the attackers are in custody. The technology will be revealed and hopefully, it will help a lot of people. That's good. But I'm going to change some other things too, Victoria continued, her voice stronger now, starting with remembering why I started this company in the first place. My mother died of breast cancer when I was 15. I started Chen Technologies because I wanted to save other daughters from losing their mothers. Somewhere along the way I forgot that. I turned it into just another business. Another way to prove I was smarter than everyone else. She stood up, smoothing down her wrinkled suit. You've given me a gift tonight, Daniel. Not just my life, but a reminder of what matters. I don't know how to repay that. You don't need to repay anything. Actually, I do, and I will. I'm not sure how yet, but I will. Victoria looked down at Lily one more time. You're a good father. That little girl is lucky to have you. After Victoria left, Daniel finally allowed himself to close his eyes and rest. His body ached everywhere, but Lily was safe. That was all that mattered. Everything else was just details. He had no idea that the night's events would change both their lives in ways he couldn't begin to imagine. Daniel and Lily finally made it back to New York 3 days later. The doctors wanted to keep Daniel under observation for a bit longer, and honestly, he was too sore to argue. Everything hurt. Getting out of bed hurt. Breathing hurt. Even laughing hurt, which was a problem because Lily kept trying to cheer him up with her silly jokes. The story had already gone viral by the time they got home. Someone on the plane had recorded part of the incident on their phone. The video was shaky and didn't show much, but it was enough. News outlets picked it up. Social media exploded. Daniel's face was suddenly everywhere, with headlines calling him things like the guardian of Flight 2847 and single dad hero. Daniel hated every second of the attention. He ignored interview requests, declined to appear on morning shows. When reporters showed up at his small Brooklyn apartment, he politely but firmly sent them away. He wasn't a hero. He was just a dad who'd done what needed doing, but other people didn't see it that way. His story resonated with folks. The single dad struggling to make ends meet who still found it in himself to protect a stranger. In a world full of bad news and people looking out for themselves, Daniel's story gave people hope. It reminded them that good people still existed. His landlord knocked on his door the week after they got back. Daniel expected another complaint about the noise or the reporters hanging around outside. Instead, the elderly man handed him an envelope. What's this? Daniel asked. Next 3 months' rent. Already paid. Anonymous donor. I can't accept that. Too late. Already processed. Use the extra money for that little girl of yours. Buy her something nice. The landlord smiled. You did a good thing, son. Let people help you for once. Similar things kept happening. The corner store owner started refusing Daniel's money for groceries. "Your money's no good here," he'd say, bagging up their purchases. "Not after what you did." Lily's school waived her tuition for the rest of the year. Neighbors dropped off meals. Strangers sent gifts and cards. It was overwhelming and uncomfortable. Daniel had never wanted charity. He'd always taken care of his own. But Lily loved all the attention. She'd show him every card that arrived, reading them out loud in her careful 6-year-old voice. "This one says you're an inspiration, Daddy." "What's an inspiration?" "It means they think I'm a good example." "You are a good example," Lily declared, hugging him carefully around his still healing ribs. A week after they returned home, Daniel got a message from Victoria Chen's assistant. Mrs. Chen wanted to meet with him. Could he come to Chen Technologies headquarters the following Tuesday? A car would be sent to pick him up. Daniel almost declined. He'd done what he'd done without expecting anything in return. He didn't want a reward or a photo opportunity, but something in the message made him curious. It wasn't demanding. It was a request politely made. So he agreed. The car that arrived on Tuesday morning was ridiculous, a sleek black town car with a driver in a suit. The neighbors all came out to watch. Lily pressed her face against the window the whole ride, amazed by the leather seats and the bottled water in the cup holders. "Are we rich now, Daddy?" she asked. "No, sweetie. Someone's just being very nice to us for a little while." Chen Technologies occupied an entire building in Manhattan, all glass and steel and modern design. Daniel felt completely out of place in his thrift store button-down shirt and the one pair of decent pants he owned. The receptionist recognized him immediately and smiled warmly. "Mr. Torres, Mrs. Chen is expecting you." 11th floor. Victoria's office was bigger than Daniel's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city. The furniture probably cost more than Daniel made in a year. But what caught his attention was the photo on her desk. A younger Victoria with an older couple, all of them smiling at some family gathering. It was the first personal thing he'd seen in the whole sterile building. Victoria herself looked different than she had on the plane or at the hospital. The power suit was back and the perfect hair and makeup, but something in her eyes was softer. "More present, Daniel. Thank you for coming." She shook his hand, then knelt down to Lily's level. "And you must be Lily. I've heard so much about you." Lily hid behind Daniel's leg, suddenly shy. "It's okay, sweetheart," Daniel said gently. "Remember? This is the lady from the airplane. The lady Daddy saved," Lily whispered. "That's right," Victoria said warmly. "Your daddy is a very special person. And I wanted to thank you too. It must have been very scary for you that night." Lily nodded, peeking out from behind Daniel. Victoria led them to a seating area by the windows. Someone brought in coffee for the adults and juice for Lily, along with a plate of cookies that made Lily's eyes go wide. "I'll get right to the point," Victoria said once they were settled. "I owe you my life, Daniel. I've been trying to figure out how to repay that debt. You don't owe me anything. Please let me finish." Victoria leaned forward. "At first I thought about money, a reward. I could write you a check that would solve a lot of your problems. But that felt wrong somehow. Transactional, like I was trying to buy my way out of feeling grateful." Daniel didn't say anything, just listened. "Then I thought about offering you a job, head of security for Chen Technologies. Excellent salary, full benefits, the works. You certainly proved you're qualified." Victoria smiled slightly. "But I realized that wasn't right either. You don't need to be my employee. That's not what this is about." "Then what is it about?" Victoria was quiet for a moment, looking out at the city. When she spoke again, her voice was different, vulnerable in a way Daniel hadn't heard before. "I told you at the hospital that I'd lost my way, that I'd forgotten why I started this company. I meant that, but it's deeper than just the business. I've forgotten how to be human, Daniel. I've spent 20 years optimizing and strategizing and maximizing profits. I've turned everything into data points and projections. I measure success in stock prices and market share." She looked at Lily, who was happily munching on a cookie. "But that night on the plane, watching you with your daughter, seeing the way you didn't hesitate to help a stranger even though it put you both at risk, I realized something. I realized that I don't have a single relationship in my life that isn't somehow related to my work or my money. I don't know how to just be a person anymore." "I'm not sure I understand what you're asking," Daniel said carefully. I'm not asking for anything. I'm offering. Victoria met his eyes. I want to change how my company operates. Not just what we make, but how we treat people. I want to build a company that values employees as humans, not just resources. I want to create policies that let people be parents and caregivers and still have careers. I want to make sure we're measuring success not just in dollars but in lives improved. She paused. But I have no idea how to do that. I've been in the corporate world so long, I've forgotten what normal people need. What matters to them. I need someone who can remind me. Someone who can tell me when I'm being ridiculous or losing sight of what's important. Someone who understands what it means to struggle and still choose kindness. You want me to work for you, Daniel said. No. I want you to work with me, as a consultant on corporate culture and employee welfare. You'd help me redesign our policies from the ground up. You'd be my reality check. The person who asks, but what about the people when I start talking about quarterly projections? Daniel looked at Lily, then back at Victoria. I don't have any experience with that. I'm not a business consultant. I'm a warehouse worker with a military background and a kid to raise. Exactly. You're exactly what I need. Someone who lives in the real world. Who knows what it's like to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. Who understands what parents need from their employers. I have plenty of people who can tell me about profit margins and market strategies. I need someone who can tell me about life. I don't know, Daniel said honestly. This is all pretty overwhelming. Think about it, Victoria said. No pressure. Take all the time you need. But Daniel, I mean this. That night changed my life. Not just because you saved it, but because you reminded me what it means to care about something more than success. You reminded me why I started this company in the first place. To help people. To make a difference. Lily had finished her cookie and was now looking at the toys in a basket by Victoria's desk. Apparently, Victoria's assistant had anticipated a 6-year-old visitor. Can I ask you something? Daniel said. Of course. Why do you care so much? You've got your success. Your company is about to change the world with this new technology. You survived an assassination attempt. Most people would just beef up security and move on. Why does one stranger's opinion matter so much? Victoria smiled, but it was a sad smile. Because in that hospital room you told me about your wife. About how she died because the cancer was caught too late. And you weren't angry at me for not having this technology sooner. You didn't blame me or my company for failing her. You just said that maybe now other families wouldn't have to go through what you did. She stood up and walked to the window. Do you know what I did when I heard that? I cried, actually cried, for the first time in probably 10 years, because I realized that I'd been so busy building this technology that I'd forgotten it was supposed to be for people like your wife, for real humans with families and futures. I'd turned cancer detection into a product launch strategy. Victoria turned back to him. You gave me back my humanity, Daniel. You reminded me that none of this matters if we forget why we're doing it. That's worth more than any security detail or any amount of money. That's priceless. They talked for another hour. Victoria told him about her plans for the company, about the foundation she wanted to start, about making Chen Technologies a place where people could have both careers and lives. Daniel found himself getting interested despite his reservations. He'd worked plenty of jobs where employees were treated like replaceable parts. What Victoria was describing sounded like something different. Something better. I'll think about it, Daniel finally said. But I need to make sure whatever I decide is right for Lily. She's been through enough upheaval. Of course. Family comes first, always. Victoria smiled at Lily, who had found a stuffed animal in the toy basket and was showing it to her rabbit. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her, Di. Neil replied. As they were leaving, Victoria handed Daniel a card. My personal number. Not my assistant's, mine. Call me if you have questions. Or if you just want to talk. I meant what I said about not having real relationships. I'd like to change that too. I think maybe we could help each other. In the car on the way home, Lily chattered excitedly about the big building and the cookies and the nice lady who gave her a toy. Daniel listened with half his attention, the other half thinking about Victoria's offer. Maybe it was crazy. Maybe he had no business trying to help a billionaire CEO figure out how to run her company better. But then again, maybe that was exactly why he should do it. Because he wasn't a business person. Because he knew what it was like to struggle. Because he understood what regular people needed. By the time they got back to their apartment, Daniel had made his decision. Daniel called Victoria the next morning. He'd stayed up half the night thinking about it, weighing the pros and cons while Lily slept peacefully in the next room. In the end, it came down to a simple question. Could he really make a difference? Could one regular guy actually change how a billion-dollar company treated its people? Maybe not. But he had to try, because if he didn't, what kind of message was he sending to Lily? That you only help when it's easy? That you only try when success is guaranteed? No, you step up when you're needed, even when you're scared. Even when you're not sure you're qualified. That's what he'd taught her on that plane, and he needed to live it now. Victoria answered on the first ring like she'd been waiting for his call. "Daniel, have you decided?" "I have some conditions," he said. "I'm listening. First, I need flexible hours. Lily has to come first. If she's sick or has a school event or just needs her dad, I need to be able to be there. No exceptions." "Agreed. Second, I'm not pretending to be something I'm not. I don't have a business degree. I'm going to tell you things you probably don't want to hear. I'm going to challenge your decisions when I think they're wrong. If you want someone who'll just agree with you, I'm not your guy." He could hear the smile in Victoria's voice. "That's exactly why I want you." "What else?" "Third, this has to actually matter. I'm not interested in being a token hire so you can feel good about yourself. If we're going to do this, we're really doing it. Real changes. Real policies that help real people, not just PR." "Daniel, I wouldn't have asked if I wasn't serious. What's your fourth condition?" "Who said I have a fourth?" "You said first, which implies there's more. And I'm guessing the fourth one is about compensation." Daniel took a breath. "I need enough to actually live on. To give Lily a good life. But I don't need to be rich. Just comfortable, fair." "How about this?" Victoria said. "Same salary as my other senior consultants, plus full benefits including healthcare and a college fund for Lily. Does that work?" Daniel almost dropped the phone. He'd looked up consultant salaries the night before, just out of curiosity. The number Victoria was offering was more than triple what he made at the warehouse. "That's more than fair. Then we have a deal. When can you start?" They agreed on 2 weeks. Enough time for Daniel to give notice at his current job, and for Lily to finish out the school month. Victoria sent over a contract that afternoon. Daniel took it to a lawyer, a free legal aid clinic someone had recommended. The lawyer read through it carefully and whistled. "This is the most employee-friendly contract I've ever seen," she said. "Full creative control over your recommendations. Protection from retaliation. Guaranteed minimum hours but flexibility for family needs. And a clause that says if the company doesn't implement at least 60% of your approved recommendations within a year, you get a bonus and the right to walk away." "Did you negotiate this?" "No," Daniel said, stunned. "That's what she sent me." "Then she's serious. This is a good deal, Mr. Torres. Take it." Daniel's first official day at Chen Technologies was intimidating. He showed up in his best clothes, which still looked shabby compared to everyone else in the building. His new office was bigger than his living room. He had an assistant, an actual assistant whose job was to help him do his job. It was surreal. Victoria gave him a tour of the whole building, introduced him to department heads and team leaders. She explained it simply. "Daniel is here to help us remember our humanity, to make sure we're building a company that serves people, not just profits. When he makes a recommendation, I want you to take it seriously. He speaks for me on matters of employee welfare and corporate culture." The reactions were mixed. Some people seemed genuinely interested. Others were clearly skeptical. Daniel couldn't blame them. He was skeptical too, but he'd promised to try, so he tried. He started by just listening. He spent the first 2 weeks walking around, talking to people at every level, janitors and executives and everyone in between. He asked them about their jobs, their lives, their struggles, what they liked about working at Chen Technologies, what they wished was different. The stories he heard broke his heart. Brilliant scientists working 80-hour weeks missing their kids' childhoods, single mothers using vacation days when their children were sick because there was no paid family leave, employees taking second jobs because the cost of living in New York was brutal, even on decent salaries. People burning out, divorcing, developing health problems from stress, and these were the lucky ones. The people working for a successful company. If they were struggling this much, what about everyone else? Daniel compiled everything into a report. Not a fancy corporate presentation with graphs and buzzwords, just honest stories and clear recommendations. He titled it What Your Employees Actually Need, and sent it to Victoria. She called him into her office the next day. The report was on her desk, pages covered in her handwritten notes. "This is devastating," Victoria said quietly. "I had no idea things were this bad." "They're bad everywhere," Daniel said. "But you have the power and resources to make them better. Here at least. Your recommendations are expensive. Paid family leave, on-site childcare, mental health services, flexible work arrangements. The board is going to fight me on this. They'll say it cuts into profits. Then you show them the cost of turnover, of lost productivity from burned-out employees, of the talent you're losing to companies that treat people better, of the PR value of actually giving a damn about your workers." Daniel leaned forward. "But honestly, Victoria, it shouldn't matter what the board thinks. You know it's the right thing to do. Sometimes that has to be enough." Victoria looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. "My father would have liked you. He always said that doing the right thing isn't complicated. We just make it complicated because the right thing isn't always the easiest thing. Smart man." "Yeah, he was." Victoria picked up her phone. "I'm calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. We're going to approve every single one of your recommendations, and if any board member has a problem with it, they can resign." The board meeting was legendary. Daniel wasn't there, but he heard about it from at least 5 different people. Victoria had apparently given a speech that left half the room in tears and the other half furious. She'd talked about her mother's death from cancer, about her father's disappointment in the person she'd become, about nearly dying on a plane and being saved by a man who had every reason to protect only himself. "We're going to be the company that proves you can be both successful and humane," she'd said. "And if you can't support that vision, there's the door." 2 board members resigned. The rest voted to approve Daniel's recommendations with full funding. Within 6 months, Chen Technologies was transformed. The on-site child care center opened, staffed by professional caregivers and teachers. Employees got 12 weeks of paid family leave regardless of gender. Mental health services were fully covered by insurance. Flexible work arrangements became standard instead of special exceptions. The company started a program to help employees with housing costs, and something unexpected happened. Productivity went up, way up. Turnover dropped to almost nothing. Employee satisfaction scores hit record highs. The company started getting awards for being a great place to work. Talented people who'd left for other jobs asked to come back. New graduates were competing for positions. Victoria had been right. Taking care of people wasn't just morally correct. It was good business, but the real changes were smaller and harder to measure. Like the research scientist who cried when she thanked Daniel for the childcare center because it meant she could finally see her kids before bedtime. Like the senior developer who'd been about to quit from burnout, but stayed after getting approved for a flexible schedule. Like the dozens of employees who stopped Daniel in the hallways to tell him their stories, to say thank you, to share how much the changes meant to them. Lily loved visiting her dad's office. Victoria had made sure there was a family lounge with toys and books where employees could bring their kids when needed. Lily made friends with other children whose parents worked at the company. She'd do her homework in Daniel's office, chattering about her day while he worked on his next set of recommendations. Victoria became a regular part of their lives too. Not in a formal way. She'd just show up sometimes, usually when Daniel least expected it. She came to Lily's school play and sat in the audience cheering louder than anyone else. She brought pizza,